Greetings, this is Frosty Thundertrod, and today I'm talking about Batteltech. Batteltech is a new game being released by Harebrained Studios here on April 24th, 2018. I am a huge Batteltech fan, having originally entered the series with MechWarrior 3. Then I went back and played MechWarrior 2, then MechWarrior 4, I played Mech Commander 1, Mech Commander 2, MechWarrior Online. I branched out into the Batteltech novels, even tracked down the old Battletech anime series, which was quite frankly awful, but was still an interesting thing to see. It was part of Battletech. And I'm very excited for this game coming out, and I wanted to talk about it since I can't show any gameplay footage. I'm just going to show a few screenshots that I've ripped off from Cold Carnage, and we're going to look at Sarna.net for some information on various battle mechs in the game. Now, everything I express here in this video is very much my opinion, and since it's taken from third-party sources, which basically means me watching other people, some of the information is going to be incorrect. I'm going to try to do my best, however, to be accurate and informative. So we're going to start off with some of the basics here. Now, what's the differences between Batteltech, the computer game, Batteltech, the tabletop game, and Mech Commander, which is also part of Batteltech but played differently. Batteltech, the computer game, is fairly new. There was an older Batteltech game in the early 90s. I don't have any experience with that particular game. That was before I got into PC gaming. At that time, I was far more tactile in my interests. But the main difference between Batteltech and MechWarrior is that MechWarrior, you're inside of piloting a single mech, usually with a joystick or mouse and keyboard. And it's a very first-person shooter type perspective. Now, one of the things with MechWarrior is that since you do all the aiming, you can do a lot more of focusing your damage that you can't do in Batteltech. In Batteltech, your hits are all determined by dice rolls. So, a lot of builds will be different. In MechWarrior, you generally only want, one or two different weapon systems. You don't want 4, 5, 6, 7, or as many different types of weapons on a mech as you can. However, in Batteltech, that's not necessarily the case. In Batteltech, you might want, 3 or 4 different types of weapons, since everything is dice roll, and you're going to be spreading your damage out anyway. This also makes armor much more valuable in Batteltech than it is in MechWarrior. In MechWarrior, survivability is more of your ability to focus down the enemy quicker than they can take you out, and to evade their fire. Now there is an evasion mechanic in the game, but no dice-based mechanic can ever compete with the evasion skills of a real player. Now, one of the biggest differences here with the computer game version of Batteltech is that the numbers are a lot bigger. In tabletop, an AC2 literally does 2 damage, and an AC20 does 20 damage. However, here in Batteltech, the video game, the damage numbers are much larger, and so is the armor numbers. This is because the tabletop is reliant on using 2d6, 2 6-sided dice, to resolve the game, and all the math has to be done, on paper in the heads of the players. As where in the computer game, all the math is done by the computer, so using large numbers is much easier. And it also gives the developers of the game more flexibility for balance. So let's say they decide that the AC2 is not quite strong enough. Now, in the 2d6 tabletop, the way they'd have to make it stronger would be to, up it to 3 damage. So that would be a 50% increase in its damage, as to where here in the computer game it does 25 damage base, and if they decide that that's not quite enough, they can just up it up to 27. So that'd be a 10% increase in damage. So by having the larger numbers, you can more finely tune and balance your game. And if you don't have to worry about, humans being able to do the math in a quick, efficient, and fun manner, that's a good route to go down. Even if you went the other route and say, instead of just, doing a flat 2 and say doing 2.10, in the end that turns into a triple digit number anyway, so it has really the same effect. Now, as I'm speaking of damage, there's actually multiple damage forms. I'm not going to say type, but forms. See, there's a few ways to damage a mech. First of all, it's just straight weapon damage. This is what damages the structure and what damages the armor. When you deal damage to a mech, if you see white numbers, that means it was damage to armor. If you see orange numbers, that means it was damage to structure. Now, in addition to doing, raw damage to the mech, you also have pilot injuries or mech warrior injuries. And here you can see one of Cole's pilots, Medusa, was killed in this battle. He got center torsoed. So Medusa's dead. Flatline, Glitch, and Behemoth all have injuries, and they're going to be incapacitated for some time. Now, as part of the game, you do make a specific mech warrior. Your mech warrior cannot be killed. It can only be injured. But every other mech warrior in the game can be killed. So that's another way of taking out a mech, is to disable the pilot. There's a couple of ways of doing this. You can do it by causing pilot injuries through shooting the mech in the head. If you destroy a side torso, that will also injure the pilot. If you knock the mech down, that will injure the pilot. And if there's any ammo here in any of the torso areas, center, left, or right torso, and that explodes, that will injure the pilot. So that is a very good way. That's called save the metal, kill the meat. Because in general, Batteltech, a mech is worth far more than a mech warrior. Now, in relative mech warriors to other soldiers, this is a very medieval feudal system. So your mech warriors are your knights. Now, people in infantry, airplanes, space superiority fighters, tanks, any other vehicle, they're basically your infantry, your armsmen. So they're considered to be a lesser class of soldier. And this is kind of represented too in the fact that a battle mech gets a lot of damage bonuses versus other vehicles. That does not apply to other battle mechs. This is a very gamey mechanic, but it's kind of a foundation of the whole feudal system, and the mech warriors being the knights of the battlefield. Doesn't necessarily mean they're gallant, doesn't necessarily mean they're noble, but they are the knights of the battlefield here in 3025. That's another thing worth mentioning, is that this game is set in 3025 in game terms. So people who have played previous MechWarrior games, they're going to, have experiences, with later time periods, during and after the Clan Wars. So a lot of technology that was available in MechWarrior 3 and MechWarrior 4 and even MechWarrior Online is not available in this game. It's lost tech. It's all been forgotten. Some of it's just been reacquired, but has not made its way out to the general public yet. Such as Gauss cannons were just recently rediscovered, but they haven't entered production yet. So There's just a few of them, within the Federated Suns. There's not going to be any out here where you can find them. However, about 5 years after this game, they will be into general production, and it would be possible to get a Gauss cannon. So they might show up in, like a DLC or an expansion pack. There is no official modding support for for Batteltech, but it is in Unity Engine, and Unity Engine tools are readily available for just about anybody to mess around with. So I would expect to see quite a bit of modeling in this game. Modding, I should say, not modeling, modding. The next type of damage is stability damage. Now, every mech, here, let me switch over to another screenshot. Here we go. Here, in this bottom corner, you have two bars. This bar down here is stability. Once the stability bar gets past this point here, where this little dot is on the bar, then the mech becomes unstable. Once the bar is completely filled, the mech will fall down. Additionally, you can cause the mech to fall over if one of its legs are destroyed. Now, every time a mech falls down, the mech warrior inside of it is injured unless they have a module equipped to protect the mech pilot. There are cockpit modules out there that you can install, which will cause the mech warrior to ignore an injury when they occur. But it will still have the other effects, meaning that while it's down on the ground, the mech is defenseless, and the enemy can use called shot to specifically target one portion of the mech. So, let's see, like right here, if he was to do a called shot, he has 55% chance to hit the mech. And then each part of the mech here would have a specific chance to hit that. So you'd roll to hit the mech, and then you would roll to hit the specific part you want, and that would be, give you the odds of hitting just that one part. Now, depending on what you want to do, you might want to try to take off a torso, because if you take off a torso, you also lose the arm, and a lot of weapons are mounted in the arm. Taking out a torso will also wound the pilot, so if you're trying to disable or kill the pilot while leaving the mech mostly intact for salvage, that's a good option. Now, if you take down the leg, that's one injury. Take out the left torso, that's a second injury. If there's any ammunition in it, that's a third injury. And you take out the other torso, that's a fourth injury. And if there's any ammunition in there, it's up to fifth injury. All mech warriors have at least 3 injuries before they're disabled. If you train up the gut skill, they can get a lot more injuries. Here, let's go back to the other screenshot here. As you can see, here Medusa had 5 injuries, but still died in battle. Glitch only has 4. Yep, so I think 5 is the top, but I'm not absolutely certain about that. Now, the next type of damage you can deal to a mech is heat. Only one weapon in the game causes heat damage, and that's flamers. However, every weapon you fire except machine guns will cause heat on your mech. And if your heat bar, which is right here, exceeds this tick, you will start to take structural damage to your mech. It's not huge amounts of damage, but it is to every single part of the mech. And if it fills up completely, your mech will just shut down. And while you're shut down, it just stops right there. You can't move, you can't fire. The mech just goes offline, and everybody gets a free shot at you. It's probably even worse than being laid down, because you're a bigger target standing up than being flat on your back. Now, up here on the top of the screen is kind of blocked, but this is your initiative phases. Each turn has 5 phases. The faster your mech is, the earlier you get to move. These white chevrons represent your mechs. Red chevrons will represent enemy mechs. So if you have a light mech, it'll usually get to move in round 5, in phase 5, which is the first one. If you got a slow assault mech, it might not be able to move until phase 2. Phase 1 is always saved for reserving. If you just want to wait till the end to take your turn, you can reserve all the way down to phase 1 before ending the turn. Now we're going to talk a bit about the various weapons in the game. Now, you have one other difference between tabletop and the game Batteltech is support weapons. This is not something that's in tabletop. But in the video game version, support weapons are flamers, machine guns, and light lasers. They still have properties of their basic type, but they get put into the support category for fitting, for hard points. So you can't put a machine gun in a ballistic hard point, and this is done for 2 reasons. One, in MechWarrior, it was kind of a common thing where you would just put, like 12 or 15 machine guns on a mech, because they're so light, they cause no heat, they don't incur any heat, and that many of them, they can actually do a respectable amount of damage, and you can just spray everything you see at very short ranges. Alternatively, it allowed you to stick a lot more autocannons on a large assault mech than they were really intended to have. So by moving machine guns, light lasers, and flamers to be support weapons and removing those hard points from the mech and changing them to be support hard points, it gives you it gets rid of some of the unbalanced builds you sometimes see in MechWarrior and MechWarrior Online. Dealing damage to the mech, each mech has a bunch of different parts. Each section of armor must be destroyed separately to reach the interior. So here we have right arm, right torso, center torso, left arm, head or cockpit. However, on the larger mechs, most of what looks like the head is actually center torso. It's only the actual cockpit part that counts as the head. Now your torsos, right, center, and left, also have rear armor. However, your arms and your legs have one armor for both sides. Now, if you destroy the center torso of a mech, you only get one piece of partial mech salvage. Unlike previous games, you can't salvage an entire mech. All mech salvage is partial mech salvage. So, if you destroy, the center torso, you're going to only get one portion of the mech. If you destroy both of its legs, you'll get 2 parts of the mech. If you knock out the pilot or destroy the head, the cockpit, without destroying the center torso and at least one leg still intact, then you get 3 partial mech salvage, and you need 3 partial mech salvage to assemble an entire mech. So there is a lot of value into thinking about how you're going to kill a mech, especially when you get down to the end. You've already, taken care of all the little ones, and all you got's the boss mech left, because usually there's going to be one mech that's bigger than the rest. It's usually the one you want. With all of its lance mates destroyed, you can think about how you want to take this mech out if you want to add it to your roster. You don't always get to necessarily decide, because you do have random dice rolls. So, when you're trying to take out a leg, you might put an AC-20 right through the torso, destroying it instead. Now, on the same token, if you're, let's say you're in this mech here and your head hasn't been destroyed yet. You only got one leg left and just a little bit of torso. You do have the option to eject. I'll go back to the other picture here. there is an option here. It might be behind coal, but you can eject from the mech. This will save your pilot's life. If it looks like they're about the next turn they're going to go down, you might as well go ahead and eject. Save your mech warrior's life, and you can recover the mech after the battle. Because while mech warrior hiring a new mech warrior itself is fairly cheap and not a big deal, replacing a trained and skilled mech warrior, however, is a lot more difficult. And there's some things that a highly skilled and experienced mech warrior can do that you can't do with a new hire. Plus, there's always the fact that if you have a mech warrior in your lance for a long time as part of your company, you kind of get to guide their development as to where if you hire an experienced mech warrior, you kind of get what they give you. Now, for the types of weapons we have, there's laser weapons. Now, laser weapons do a lot of heat to you, but they're very reliable damage out. They only do combat damage. They only damage armor and structure, and they will do critical damage, of course, to components inside. So if you have, let's say there's a PPC here in this right arm, all the armor's gone from it. So now every time a weapon strikes this right arm, there's a chance that they will do critical damage to the PPC. The first critical to the PPC damages it, and it will have an accuracy penalty and might produce more heat. I'm not sure if that's the case here in the game. I know it is in tabletop, where a damaged weapon will usually produce more heat or have a chance to jam or misfire, which I think in game all it does is cause an accuracy penalty. So that's something to consider. If you destroy the right torso, the right arm will go with it. Generally speaking, most mechs like to mount their weapons in the arms because the arms are kind of like gimbal mounts. So a weapon in the arm has a much wider arc of fire than a weapon in the torso. I'm not completely certain this is truly modeled in Batteltech. However, you will notice if you're standing with an obstacle in front of you and your arm is sticking out past the obstacle, you will have much better chance to hit with the arm mounted weapon than you will with the torso mounted weapon. Lasers, getting back on track, here we go. Here's some medium lasers. Medium lasers overall are one of the most reliable weapons. They have good damage per ton. They only weigh 1 ton and deal 25 damage. They produce a lot of heat, but it's manageable on most biomes. Some biomes, such as lunar, where you have no atmosphere, so you will not be able to dissipate heat as effectively. This is also a change from previous Mech Warrior games. In previous Mech Warrior games, they gave you a bonus in space to dissipating heat. This was generally it's thought that the colder it is, the easier it is to dissipate heat. But what that doesn't include is the fact that most heat dissipation is done through a process called convection. So that means there's something passing over the heat sinks that transfers the heat from the heat sink to the air, to the water. So in space, there's very little. I mean, there's always a small amount of, hydrogen, itty-bitty little particles, but there's very little out there to transfer the heat to. So instead of being able to use convection to get rid of heat quickly, all it can do is radiate heat out into space, which is far less efficient. And of course, there's such things as deserts. Some places you'll be fighting, they'll have, geothermal heat coming up from the ground, which will make your mechs even hotter. So that's always something to consider. If you're going to go into a map that looks like it's hot, you might want to leave your laser boats at home and, bring missiles or projectiles instead. Lasers have no minimum range. Small lasers have a very short maximum range, and since they are support weapons, they can be fired independently, but they will fire automatically if your mech does a melee attack. Now, this is something that was never offered in the Mech Warrior games, and I don't think it was in Mech Commander either. So it was in the tabletop. So this is something relatively new in the computer world for this BattleTech game, where you're going to have the ability to use melee attacks. And some mechs are absolutely devastating in melee, and others, being in melee, will just make them too vulnerable. So, while that is cool, definitely cool and something new, you want to think carefully about which mechs you're going to melee and when you're going to melee. Let's see here. Now, the Centurion here, this is an excellent mech to melee with. Now, it's AC-20 and 2 medium lasers, will be perfectly fine firing up close. So, if for some reason, let's say you're a little bit high on heat or you're low on ammunition, you might just want to punch somebody instead of, using up your ammunition or your heat. Now, if you do a melee attack against a vehicle, it's a guaranteed destroyed vehicle. So that is something you need to take in consideration too. So, in the early stages of the mission, if you got a bunch of vehicles out in front of you, you might want to just stomp on them instead of, wasting your ammunition. Now, the Panther here with the PPC. Now, PPC is an energy weapon, so it doesn't require any ammunition, but it has a minimum range. So if you're close enough to melee, this PPC is going to be completely ineffective. In this case, using a melee attack should only be used if you're, if you're cornered somewhere and you can't get away. Generally speaking, if you're in this Panther and you're armed with a PPC, you're going to want to stay away as much as you possibly can. What the heck? Alright, now jump jets. There's another type of melee attack. It's called Death from Above. That's where basically you use your jump jets to go up into the air and land on the enemy. This does massive amounts of damage to the enemy, but also does damage to your legs. Now, there are some modules you can buy and equip which will reduce the amount of damage you take, but you're always going to end up taking some damage, and your legs are kind of a critical portion of the mech. Losing a leg is far more detrimental to a mech than losing an arm, especially since some arms don't have any weapons in them, they're just shields to absorb damage. All laser weapons get an accuracy bonus. Now, large lasers have a pretty good range to them. There's none in this shot, but they have a pretty good range, and they still can be used up close. They produce a lot of heat. They're overall one of my favorite weapons in the game. Medium lasers are a very standard weapon. You can put a lot of them on a mech. They do produce a lot of heat, but it's usually manageable if you don't go too crazy with it. And they're perhaps, kind of one of the basic, most reliable weapons you can have. And then the small laser, it has a very short range, 90 meters, which is about 3 to 4 times the length of your mech. But they will fire automatically when you're in a melee situation. So if, let's say, you were the Centurion here, and you had 2 small lasers mounted, and you punched something, right after you punched it, your 2 small lasers would fire. Small lasers have the most damage per ton of any fired weapon. No, well, the most damage per ton, of course, is melee because there's no tonnage involved in it. It's just straight damage. But, of any weapon you can fire, small lasers get the most damage per ton because they only weigh half a ton and they do 20 damage. That's where the medium laser does 25 damage and weighs 1 ton, which is pretty much the second most effective per ton damage. So the next type of weapon I've mentioned before here is PPCs. PPCs are energy weapons, so like lasers, they don't require ammunition. So there's no ammunition to blow up if you if you lose your armor and start taking internal damage. But they do have a minimum range, so these are meant to be used at long ranges. Now PPCs also deal stability damage, but generally speaking, if you're shooting a mech with a PPC, you will destroy it before you knock it over unless you really spread that damage out a lot. Lasers never cause any stability damage at all. Only PPCs are the only energy weapon that causes stability damage. One other type of energy weapon is the flamer, which is also a support weapon. The flamer does very little actual damage, but what it does do is it puts heat into the enemy mech. In some cases, this is highly advantageous because it will force the enemy mech to shut down or even just overheat and take, small amounts of damage through the entire structure. Which if you got a limb or something that's barely holding on, just that small bit of structural damage from heating, can be, take an arm off or a torso. But they're very situational. They're not useless weapons, but they're very situational as to when they are useful. Next type of weapons are autocannons. These are an old mech warrior's favorites. They come in a few different sizes. AC2s have a minimum range and are meant for very long range. They deal a little bit of damage. They deal 25 damage, same as a medium laser, but they weigh a lot more and they have ammunition which can explode if it takes a hit. Now, an AC2 also does stability damage to their target. Now, typically speaking, if you're just, paddling away at an enemy with an AC2, you will knock it down before you will destroy it. Now, when you knock a mech down, of course, you inflict a wound onto the mech warrior, unless they have a module equipped to protect the mech warrior, and it will force the mech to go back one phase in initiative. So from then on, you will be moving sooner than that mech. So if you knock down a light mech with a medium mech, that's going to put the light mech behind you in the initiative order. So that means that the next turn, you will get to move first, which can be quite the advantage. Next size up is the AC5. AC5, it doesn't have as much range as the AC2, but its minimum range is also less, so it's a mid-range weapon. Its stability damage and actual damage to the mech is about the same, so it's kind of a 50-50 if you're going to blow through a section of a mech or knock it over first. The next iteration of the AC is the AC-10. Now, the AC-10 has no minimum range, but it can still reach out for quite a ways. It is a good mid-range weapon, a very reliable weapon. It's one of the favorite weapons of traditional mech warriors. The next up is what you see here. It's the AC-20. The AC-20 has no minimum range, but its maximum range is relatively limited. It can still reach out to just the edge of minimum range, but it's medium range, but it's considered a short range weapon. Now, what the AC-20 will do is, these here are medium mechs. An AC-20 will probably strip the armor off any one section of these mechs. But on the other hand, if you happen to hit a light mech center torso with an AC-20, it's probably a one-shot kill. It's just going to go down. I've seen Circumflex do this quite a few times. So that pretty much covers the ACs. Now there is the machine guns. The machine guns are also a ballistic weapon that works a little bit differently. Machine guns are support weapons, so they will fire automatically when you do a melee attack. They don't do much damage to armor, but they are highly effective against structure, and they have an increased chance to do critical damage. So if you expose a section of the mech and then hit it with a machine gun, there's a good chance that whatever components, weapons, ammo that's in that section is going to be destroyed. However, there's no guarantee that the machine gun will hit the same portion of the mech that you just stripped the armor from. Now, machine guns do require ammunition. They only weigh half a ton. Then the ammunition can explode, but they generate no heat. So they're an interesting weapon. If you got, a ton and a half of mech left, there's no reason not to just throw one on there. They can be fired independently at very short range. Same as a small laser. Next up, we have missile weapons. Missile weapons come in two varieties: SRMs, short-range missiles, and LRMs, long-range missiles. Now, short-range missiles will deal a lot more damage to the mech. It's more likely to destroy the mech before it is to knock the mech over. Short-range missiles canonically are not guided. However, in-game they have fairly good accuracy. All missiles are fired in groups. The number behind the weapon, such as SRM 6, means it's going to fire 6 missiles. Here's some right here. Now, an LRM 20 is going to fire 20 missiles. LRM missiles do less physical damage, but more stability damage. An SRM 2 is the smallest SRM, and it can still do a decent amount of damage to a mech. As to where an LRM 5 is really just kind of a nuisance. Strip off some of the evasion, but it's not. You'll never really feel really that threatened by somebody firing an LRM 5 at you. Of course, given enough time, it will get the job done, but it's more of a nuisance weapon. Something that, if you have a short range mech, you might have an LRM 5 stick in there, to try to pepper the enemy a little bit as you close range. Now, LRMs don't need a direct line of sight, unlike every other weapon. An LRM, if you have another one of your lance mates or an ally that has sight, or if you use sensor lock, they can fire over obstacles and rain from above. This is a very useful ability, because most mechs that are equipped for LRMs don't have very much armor, so it's a good idea to keep them hidden. But one thing you want to consider is that you don't want the mech warrior with the sensor lock ability to be in your LRM mech, because once you sensor lock, that ends your turn, so you won't be able to fire your LRMs. So put your sensor locking mech warrior into a short range mech that would not be able to fire that turn because everything's out of range. Then it can sensor lock and then let its LRM armed lance mates, at least do some damage that round. Now, LRM is way more likely to knock a mech down before they destroy it. In fact, that's what LRMs are really the best at, is knocking mechs down. So if you want to capture a mech without destroying it, by disabling the pilot, firing a salvo LRMs from the right, then another one from the left, back and forth, so you're spreading the physical damage around, but you're still putting all that stability damage into it, is a great way just to keep knocking the mech down over and over again until the pilot's disabled. Another thing with indirect fire LRMs is that since you have so many projectiles coming in and they're coming from a downwards direction, you do have a much better chance of hitting the head or the cockpit of a mech than you would with just about any weapon. Even if you have a lot of medium lasers and you're shooting into it from the front, your not as likely to hit the head as you are with an LRM-15. Now, each missile, however, rolls the hit separately. So when you see you have an 85% chance to hit, that means each individual missile in the salvo has an 85% chance to hit. So that means some of those missiles won't hit. So it's very rare you will actually do max damage with an LRM salvo. SRM salvos also, roll separately, but they generally are better about, since there's only 6 of them, there's a fairly good chance if you have a high percentage shot that all of them are going to hit. So SRMs are better for outright destroying a mech. LRMs are better for harassing at range and knocking mechs down. So that pretty much covers the weapons. Since this is 3025, there's a few weapons that mech warriors have came to know that will not be available. Gauss rifles. Gauss rifles were just rediscovered by House Davian literally, I think it was 2023, so they were only just discovered, 2 years ago. They will reach full deployment in 2030, which is 5 years after this game is set. And the same thing is true of the Raven mech. Many people consider, the Raven kind of the defining light mech in MechWarrior, but it just went into prototype stage in 2024, so there's not going to be any around for you to be able to capture. However, Harebrained Schemes says that in a later release, so let's say a DLC or something that might be set a couple years later, the Raven will be included in that. And of course, there's nothing to keep, people from just modding the Raven in. Which, like I've said before, this is a Unity engine game, so many people have access to Unity tools and can, mod stuff in fairly easily if they know what they're doing. So there's no Artemis systems for your missiles. Artemis, makes your missiles fire in a tighter group. That's not available. That's lost tech. There's no beacon active probes. Those are also lost tech. Tag lasers are lost tech. There's no extended range lasers. There's no pulse lasers. There's no X lasers. There's no cases. Cases are a piece of equipment that can be mounted to mechs here in a couple of years, which will contain an ammo explosion. So if you had an ammo in your right torso and then a case in the right torso, if that got destroyed, it would protect the center torso and the pilot from taking damage. But that technology is not available right now. It's been forgotten. So these are all called lost tech. Now, it is possible in game you might encounter certain boss mechs which are from an earlier age. They're survivors from the Star League era, which still have a lot of old lost tech in them. But those are going to be extremely rare, and they're going to be boss fights. And I would be extremely surprised if you could recover any of that lost tech. Because chances are that your current mech techs just would not know how to use it or what to do with it, so they'll probably just get sold off to somebody who might be able to reverse engineer it. Now, mechs are divided by weight classes. You have light mechs, medium mechs, heavy mechs, and assault mechs. You generally start with light and medium mechs. Early in the game, you use light mechs because it's what you got. They're not very good for you right now, but they're what you have, so you're going to try to upgrade to medium mechs as soon as possible. Now, however, later in the game, when you have a very well-trained mech warrior, with, topped-out piloting abilities, so they can get, as many possible, evasion chevrons, light mechs suddenly become viable again. One of the strategies that you can use for light mechs is, since they usually move first in initiative. Let's go back here. So Generally, a light mech will get to move here in phase 5, as to where medium mech doesn't get to move until phase 4, heavy mechs in phase 3, assaults in phase 2, and then phase 1 is saved for if you want to wait till the very end of the turn to move. So what a light mech can do is it can reserve until the very end of the turn to phase 1. And then it can move, fire its weapons, and then the very next turn it will get to move first in phase 5. So before the mech that you just shot has a chance to move or shoot back, you get the option to either shoot it again or to get out of line of sight, break line of sight, get behind hard cover so you can't take return fire. This is a great way to exploit weaknesses. So let's say you've been, while you were closing up, your long range mechs were, peppering them with PPCs, large lasers, AC2s, AC5s, LRMs. So now you're almost up here into short range. And the enemy mech, now has a few weaknesses open. Some of its armor's damaged. So now the light mech comes out of cover, gets right up there, and just unloads everything it's gotten into the much larger mech. Alright. Now there's a good chance it's going to blow through the armor, maybe do some internal damage. And then right here at the start of the next turn, it gets to do it again. So now this light mech essentially got to fire twice, and it's going to be dealing damage depending on the mech. More in line with a medium mech or even a heavy mech. You might take a mech down completely then, or knock it down, which will give you a chance, to get away or get into cover. So light mechs, they have a bit of a learning curve. You use them at the start of the game because they're all you have. Then they get kind of sidelined for a while, and then once you get, properly trained up mech warrior, they come back again and be useful additions to your lance. Medium mechs are kind of like the Sherman tank of the battle mech. It's not the biggest tank, it's not the fastest, it's not the biggest mech, it's not the fastest mech, except for the Cicada, which is the fastest mech. But they kind of do everything really well. So a good medium mech can take you all the way through the game. You probably won't want an entire lance from later on in the game, but they will. But one or two of them inside your lance will actually be able to go through the end of the game. The next up is the heavy mech. This is my favorite class of mech. This deals a great deal of damage. Most heavy mechs can put out very close in the amount of damage to what an assault mech can do. Where the assault mechs really outpace the heavy mechs, however, is in durability. Even the lightest assault mechs can take more of a beating than the heaviest medium mechs or heavy mechs. But a lot of the assault mechs also don't really have much more firepower than a heavy mech does. And heavy mechs are generally faster, more maneuverable. Overall, I consider them probably the best class of mech, and they can take you through the entire game. Now, assault mechs are the final class of mechs. These are the largest and the heaviest ones. As I mentioned before, they don't necessarily have more firepower, although there's some that do, but they're generally way tougher than a heavy mech. But they're usually the slowest ones that you can count on. Now we're going to go over here to Sarna.net. Sarna.net is kind of the, too long didn't read version of Batteltech. All the basic information is here, so if you ever want to come look at a mech, this is a great place to do it. Now this page here is specifically to this video game and lists all the mechs currently in the game. So I'm going to go through each mech and tell you what I think about them. Right, first one here is the Locust. The Locust is the lightest mech in the game, and both the tabletop and the video game. At 20 tons, it's the smallest thing that can be considered a mech. Anything smaller than 20 tons is considered a proto mech. The Locust has the fastest speed you can have in any mech. However, it's not the only one that moves at this speed. There are a few others that do as well. Some of the variants can be halfway decent long-range LRM lobbers, but there's other mechs that can do this so much better. Has a scout mech, it's intended to be, to run around really fast, and I guess in game, if you had a tapped out piloting a mech warrior, it can kind of invasion tank, which, it can run around and, be a distraction. Very hard to hit. But there are a few ways to remove evasion, and once this thing actually gets hit, it's the end of it. I mean, if you generally when you see enemy locusts in a battle, you're just looking at it as free loot. I mean, because you're going to take them out in 1-2 shots, and you're just going to sell the mech. Even if you recover a whole mech, you're just going to sell it. Commando. Now this one's a little bit heavier than Locust at 25 tons. Now the Commando isn't as fast. It is still a fast mech, but doesn't compete with the Locust in terms of speed. What it, however, does have is firepower. With its SRM-6 and SRM-4, it can deal a lot of damage at very close range. This is a good mech for I was talking about, of reserving to the end and then doing 2 attacks back to back. Because, 2 SRMs into the back of a heavy mech will breach through its armor and start doing massive damage on the inside. If you can get a fairly concentrated burst, you might take off a torso or an arm. Overall, the Commando is a useful mech. Next up is Spider. Now, Spider also has the fastest speed in the game, along with the Locust and the Cicada and a couple others. At 30 tons. Now it's armed with 2 medium lasers. 2 medium lasers is an okay. It'll be very effective on taking out vehicles, by either stomping on them, or a lot of the smaller vehicles can even be destroyed outright by 2 medium lasers. But since the scouting technology is not really available in the game, the Spider can't really be what you would think of as a scout mech. It can evasion tank. It can take a little bit more damage than Locust can. So, it can, run around really fast, build up a whole bunch of evasion chevrons, shoot mechs with its 2, medium lasers, be a nuisance, and, be very hard to hit. But it can't really fight, toe-to-toe with another mech. However, it does have jump jets, which the last 2, the Commando and the Locust, do not. This is actually one of the mechs that you do get early on. Next up is the Firestarter. The Firestarter is one of the best light mechs you can get. It's at the same speed as the Commando, but its default armament is 4 flamers and 2 medium lasers and 2 machine guns. This mech, even though it's a light, can actually be a halfway decent melee attacker, since you can punch with it, which will do about, I think it's 80 damage, and then your flamers and machine guns are going to, fire and deal some damage. On very hot maps, the flamers can do some real damage to enemies by overheating them and shutting them down. However, I think the best use for the fire starter is to arm it with as many medium lasers as you can and just let it, unleash into a enemy mech. It also has somewhat decent armor for its weight category. So it's a good mech all around, and it does have jump shots, so it can do death from above attacks, which also not really a great idea, but it's an option. So this is something I would consider as a good vehicle destroyer and a good cavalry exploiter. So yeah, so if you weaken an enemy mech with long range fire, this can move in quite quickly, do the reserve double strike, and do a lot of damage. So this is one of the better light mechs. Now the Jenner. The Jenner is probably the best light mech in the game. Now, it has the second best speed, so it's faster than the Firestarter, it's faster than the Commando, but not as fast as the Locust. At 35 tons, it doesn't have as much armor as the Firestarter, but it has a very effective, weapon loadout. An SRM-4 and 4 medium lasers. That's 100. That's 100 damage worth of laser right there, and 36 damage worth of missile. But since it's 5 separate weapon systems, you're not all going to hit the same spot, but that's still pumping out a lot of damage. So if you do the reserve and fire twice thing, you just put out 264 damage. Some battle mechs only have that amount of armor, so it is an effective mech when used properly, and it does have jump jets. So if you have a skilled pilot that can build up a lot of evasion chevrons, this thing can be a killer in the right hands. Panther is kind of your first long-range support mech with a PPC and an SRM-4. Now, it is possible to keep it at a range where the PPC and SRM-4 can both be effective, but when you do that, you're going to make yourself very exposed to return fire. And this mech only has average speed. It's nowhere near as fast as most light mechs. So I would actually remove the SRM-4 and put a LRM on it, even if it's just a 5, and just keep it back. If you have to get close, just rely on melee at that point, because if this thing gets up close and personal, it's very sideways situation. But has a support as a long range sniping mech, it is quite effective. Now the last light mech is the urban mech, or the Irby, or the egg of death. These things are egg-shaped little mechs. They're technically light mechs, but they're slow. They are the slowest mech in the game, but they're armed with an autocannon 10 and a token small laser. In an open situation, these things are just target practice in an open field. But like the name suggests, they're meant for urban combat where you don't have long-range firing capabilities. They're meant to just hide around a corner. They do have jump jets, so they can, pop around, unleash their autocannon 10, a small laser into somebody, and then do massive amounts of damage. Since they're so slow, they can't really do the reserve down and shoot twice thing very well. They can do it because at 32 kilometers an hour, even assault mechs are faster than this thing. It's really intended to be cheap and a swarm, which in the game you only get 4 mechs at the most. You only get 1 lance. There are times, however, where there will be allied lances around you, so these might show up as allied mechs, in which they might be effective. So I don't think you'll be using these much in your lance, but you might have to deal with them from the enemies. So, like if you're pushing into a city, you have to retake a city. Um, Urban mechs are going to be a real pain for you because they're just going to pop out and unleash that autocannon 10. Urban mechs also have a lot of armor for a light mech, so they won't necessarily go down to one shot the way a Locust will. Alright, now we go to medium mechs. First up is the Cicada, which is the Locust's big brother. Now it's a 40-ton mech. It has, two medium lasers and one small lasers. It is got the fastest speed in the game, so it's tied with the Locust and the Spider, but it's also a bigger target. Since it is a medium mech, it has more structural strength and a little bit more armor than most lights can have, but it doesn't have the weapons to really take advantage of being considered a medium mech. It's considered a scout mech, but the whole scouting mechanic in Batteltech right now doesn't work quite the way it used to. So, it can probably be put into some use, and it does have an LRM variant just like the Locust does, so it can stand back and be an LRM mech. But there are other medium mechs that are much better at that. So unless you're, got some sort of tonnage restrictions for you on a drop, I would probably just sell any cicadas you get. Blackjack. Now the Blackjack is your starting mech. Everyone gets a Blackjack at the start of the game. That's what you do your tutorial in, and it's what your pilot comes to the mercenary company with. The Blackjack is not a overly tough mech, although you can up armor it to be pretty durable, but it's a long range fire support, armed with 2 AC2s and 4 medium lasers. The AC2s can reach out and touch somebody. The medium lasers still have pretty good range, but they can also work up close. I would think with this one, I would go either autocannons or medium lasers. So, I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop the autocannons and go with 2 large lasers. That will give me a good amount of damage, great deal of range flexibility, because I think this mech is kind of wants to be in the center. It can hang in the back, but I want to try to keep it at mid range so it can move around a lot and be able to deliver good strikes. Now another counter to that would be to drop some of the medium lasers and upgrade the autocannon 2s to autocannon 5s, which it'll have to stay back a little. It'll have to be more careful about range than it would with just 2 large lasers, but it would do a fairly decent amount of damage and reliably. Another option would be 1 AC-10, 1 large laser. I personally think the AC-10 and the large laser support each other very well. The AC-10 has no minimum range, and it can still reach out, for a fair distance. Most of the maps in this game are not particularly large, so you're not going to need to make very, very long shots all that often. In that case, I imagine that 1 AC-10 and 1 large laser will do very good work together. Overall, I kind of like this mech, even though the canon for it says it has a bad reputation. And I gotta think that part of the reason that it became your starter mech is for its designation of BJ1, so everybody can make BJ jokes. Vindicator. This is another long-range missile. This is another long-range mech. It has more armor than the Panther, and it has the same speed. So this is a decent mech. Well, its default configuration is to be, long range with a PPC and an LRM5. It can be reconfigured to be a halfway decent up close and personal mech. I think this has two variants available. Now, the main thing with the mech variants is they don't necessarily decide what the mech does. They just decide, the number of hard points they have and where they're at on the mech. This is overall a halfway decent mech. But, I think I would try to use it for its long range potential. I'll probably drop the PPC for a large laser and then get a bigger LRM, like go from maybe a LRM 10. I might just drop the small laser altogether. Next up, if the page doesn't jump on me, is the Centurion. Now, the Centurion in game really looks nothing like this. This is a very old concept art. Centurion is a very tough mech. It can fight at any range, but a lot of people like to use them for up close and personal. One of the more popular mechs from the Batteltech novels was called the Yaoling, which was a Centurion with an autocannon 20 in the right arm and two medium lasers in the center torso. The left arm was nothing but shield. Doesn't show here, but the actual in-game model actually does have a small shield here on the left arm. It's a very good and effective close-range mech, and one of the variants can mount jump jets. It doesn't show up here as being able to mount jump jets, but the in-game version that you get for free basically can mount jump jets. It can also mount missiles, so if you wanted to, it can also be a long-range support mech. I think the default configuration is, two medium lasers. Right here. Two medium lasers, an autocannon 10, and an LRM 10. So this, by default, this is kind of a mid-ranged, because the autocannon medium lasers have no minimum range, but they can still reach out to medium range pretty well. And the LRM 10 isn't very good at short range, but it can still be effective at medium range, and it can reach out past the range of the missiles or the autocannon to provide long range support when needed as closing. It's an average speed mech, and it's very notorious since it has the two lasers in the center torso. It's notorious for becoming a stick. Basically, one leg, center torso, and head, with the right torso, left torso, both the arms, and one leg off, and it's still being combat effective because of having the two lasers. Because by that point in the battle, the other mechs are probably pretty damaged too, and two medium lasers may be all you need to finish off a damaged mech. Next up is the Enforcer. This is another 55-ton mech. See, this has the autocannon 10 and large laser combination I was talking about doing possibly with the Blackjack, but it's a little bit heavier mech with more armor. I would give this mech a lot of respect. However, everything it does, there's another medium mech that can do a little bit better. But I would not treat this mech lightly. If you see it on the map, try to take out that AC-10 in the right arm as quickly as possible. The Hunchback. Alright, now the Hunchback, this thing is one of the most common mechs canonically in the Batteltech universe. There's two versions in the game, the 4G and the 4P. The 4G has an AC-20 in the right torso, which is, you can see here now. So AC-20 is a one-shot light mech killer. It'll take the armor clean off a medium mech, and most heavy mechs. Only an assault mech can really hope to take more than 2 shots from an AC-20 in the same spot. Um, it's an average speed. It does not come with jump jets, but it has pretty good armor. Of course, you have 2 medium lasers for backup, and then 1 small lasers for melee. This is a other version. The 4P has a lot. Here it is. The HBK 4P. It has a lot of medium lasers. 6 medium lasers in place of the AC-20. Now, 6 medium lasers has more damage potential than the AC-20. But since it's 6 weapons instead of 1, you know, all 6 of those weapons can theoretically hit a different part of the mech, as to where the AC-20 is going to deliver all of its damage in one spot. Plus, 6 medium lasers, you're going to have some heat problems, as to where the AC-20, you're going to have ammunition problems. So, I mean, either one's a good support. But if you're, doing the 4P, you might want to, pick up an extra ton of ammunition. If you're doing the 4P, you want to, pick up some more heat sinks. If you're doing the 4G, you might want to find a way to put some more ammunition into it. Overall, it's hard to say anything bad about the Hunchback other than, it's not a heavy mech. Although at 55 tons, it's as big as a medium as you can get. Trebuchet. This is your first dedicated LRM boat mech. It has 2 LRM-15s and 3 medium lasers. It has an average speed, but no jump jets. This, when you first get it, this is perhaps going to be your LRM boat for a while. As far as direct fire as far as missile capacity, it's comparable to the heavier mechs like the Catapult. However, it doesn't have as much other flexibility. So I would say when you get this thing, put 2 LRM 15s in it, plus if you can get, maybe drop one of those medium lasers for another ton of ammo, because you don't want this thing to be close range. Because the reason it can fit all that firepower into a medium mech is it sacrifices its armor to do it. This is actually a fast mech. It's a little bit faster than the Hunchback and the Centurion. The Griffin. The Griffin is another good medium range mech. Here it's set up as a long range supporter, but with its speed, you can reconfigure this to be an effective medium range mech pretty easily. Going with large lasers or a mix of SRMs and medium lasers. At 55 tons, it's still a fast mech, and you can stick quite a bit of armor into it. So this is something you might want to use if you want to be mobile and still be able to deliver a big punch. Or you can use it as it's intended to stand back and deliver a long-range strike. Kintaro. Kintaro is a very heavily armored medium mech. It's more for close range with SRMs and medium lasers. Now, as I mentioned before, the NARC beacon is not available in 2020 and 3025. So that's not going to be in there. You're going to get an extra SRM instead. At 86.4 kilometers an hour, this is a fast mech. It's faster than the average medium, but it can up armor very well. And the lightness of the missiles and relatively low heat means it can move around and deal a lot of missile damage, or it can stand back and be a long-range support mech, which I think you're kind of missing out on some of its abilities if you hold back with it. I think I would use this thing right up front. Shadowhawk. This is a kind of a mixed range mech. You have, an AC5, LRM5, SRM2, one medium laser. Its default configuration has a problem of being too much of a um, all phases mech. Where you want to be using, there is a range you can get into where all these will come into effect, but it's a relatively narrow window. LRM5 is, it's a nuisance weapon. It's not a serious threat to anything. It's, just something to soften up when you can't reach with anything else. Which with an autocannon 5, there's not going to be much you can't reach otherwise. The SRM2 and the one medium laser really aren't going to help you that much if something gets in too close for the autocannon in the LRM5. So I think I would just choose one or the other with this. Be it a long range mech or an up close and personal mech. There are two variants. One has more missiles and the other one has more projectiles. You get a Shadow Hawk very early in the game. Wolverine. This thing in game is beastly. It also suffers a little bit from the same problem that the Shadow Hawk does, is it tries to be an all-range, all-purpose mech. With an autocannon 5, SRM6, and a medium laser. Now, it is possible to get in a position where, all these weapons are effective, but that's a relatively narrow window. Or in the stack configuration, you're going to want a mech warrior with multi-target, so that you can shoot something further away with the AC5, and then shoot something closer with the SRM6 and the medium laser. When you see it in game, this looks like something that should be a melee mech, but its default configuration isn't really set up for that, even though it does have jump jets, and you could make it into an effective melee mech. Now we're into the heavies. I consider the heavy class to be the best class overall. Dragon. The Dragon is a fast mech. It has more durability than any of the mediums, but doesn't really have that great of weapon loadout. Just an LRM-10 and an AC-5 with 2 medium lasers. So this is something that's relatively fast, but kind of durable, So it can, stand back and provide support, and it can take counterfire to a certain extent. There's some variants to this. This is something you can experiment around and see. I would say that it's a good long-range mech, but at 60 tons, there's other heavies that just do everything so much better than it does. Quick Draw. This is another 60-ton mech. This is actually, if you just follow the storyline, this is the first heavy mech that you come up against and have a chance to salvage any part of. Alright, this is a missile mech with an LRM-10 and an SRM-5. 4, I mean. So it is possible to once again get yourself into a situation where your LRMs, SRMs, and medium lasers are all effective. But I think I would drop the medium lasers for a large laser and probably drop the SRM4 for a bigger LRM and just hang back. Because a large laser can reach out and touch somebody at more effective LRM range, and it can still be used up close and personal if it becomes a necessity. Quick Draw doesn't have as much armor as a lot of other heavy mechs, but it does have jump jets. Catapult. Catapult is kind of like the definitive missile mech. Has the same missile loadout as Trebuchet, but it has another medium laser. It has the same speed, but it has jump jets, more armor and more structure since it's a heavy. Or alternatively, you can put more ammunition into it. Um, if you get a catapult, it really should be part of your lance. There's no reason if you have a catapult not to use it. It is one of the definitive mechs in the game. Jaeger mech. This is your starting blackjack's big brother with two AC5s, two AC2s, and two medium lasers. This thing is a monster at long range. Another option to this is two AC10s and then a few medium lasers, or even two AC10s and a large laser. It doesn't have jump jets and it's only average speed, but this thing dishes out a lot of damage, but I can't really take it because its armor is also relatively thin for a heavy. But with some work in the mech lab, you can up armor it and move things around. It's a great hot mech map. Hot map mech. Boy, say that 3 times fast. The Thunderbolt. Now, I kind of like the Thunderbolt because it looks a lot like my favorite mech of all time, the Thor, aka the Summoner. Large laser, LRM-15, 3 medium laser, 1 SRM-2, 2 machine. Now, the thing about the Thor is that the cockpit and the missile tube are on opposite sides on the Thor, and the Thor is a 75-ton mech, and this is a 65-ton mech, and the Thor has jump jets. You know, its default configuration: 1 large laser, 1 LRM-15, 3 medium lasers, and an SRM-2, 2 machine guns. This one can either be a long-range support mech. You know, you can do mixed support with missiles and energy weapons. Or you could be an up-close and personal brawler. You know, especially with these support weapons, you know, this can be an effectively punch-them-in-the-face mech. And of course, you can still have SRMs and medium lasers, you know, to shoot things that aren't quite within melee range. Overall, I really like this mech. Grasshopper. This is a jumping mech. It's average speed, but does have jump jets at 70 tons. 1 large laser, 4 medium lasers, 1 LRM-5. LRM-5 is kind of token to provide a little bit support at range. It's average speed, so this thing can jump around and provide, you know, good reliable firepower at just about any range, you know, from short to medium. At long range, you are down to only the large laser and the LRM-5. I think I would probably just dump the LRM-5 for more heat sinks and more armor. This is the first heavy mech I ever used way back in Mech Warrior 3. I didn't know what I was doing with this thing, but I somehow managed to get by. An autocannon 10, an LRM-15, 2 medium lasers, and an SRM-4. This is a respectable weapons loadout. These weapons can, you know, share a effective range, and it's average speed, no jump jets. However, I think I would drop the long range missiles in favor of more short range missiles. Probably go up to 2 SRM-6s instead of an LRM-15. Possibly more ammunition, more heat sinks. This isn't really a heat dependent mech, although it can be. It's hard to go wrong with an Orion though. The only thing it doesn't have is jump jets, but everything else you can want, you know, average speed, good armor, good weapons. Cataphract. Now, the Cataphract in game I believe is the 1X. Alright, because the LBX cannons haven't been aren't in game yet, neither are the Ultra Auto Cannons. So this variant, you can't have it in current game. However, it's an average speed mech. It has some firepower comparable to the Orions with jump jets, but it's a little bit lighter, so it's going to sacrifice some armor protection. So with an AC5 and an AC10 working together, it can fight at medium ranges, and the medium lasers are still effective at medium ranges. So, and at close range, the AC5 will drop out, but the medium lasers and LBX will be fine. At long range, the medium lasers and autocannon 10 would drop out, but the AC5 would still be effective. So it has some flexibility. Overall, it's a very good mech that I would not be disappointed in taking into the field. I actually used one of these for quite a while in Mech Warrior Online. I think I had it armed with 3 large lasers and 3 machine guns. And something like that might be still effective here in Batteltech, but I haven't had a chance to really test that out yet. Alright, the Black Knight. Anybody who played Mech Warrior 4 Mercenaries will have a familiarity with this mech. Large lasers, medium lasers, and a small laser. This thing has an average speed of 75 tons. The Beagle Active Probe is not available in 3025, so that won't be available. This is a great energy weapons mech, but it runs hot. However, if you're going into a tundra world or something like that where it's going to be cold, this thing is devastating because no ammunition to blow up, no ammunition to run out of. And if you can dissipate the heat quickly enough, it is truly devastating. I think I would probably drop the PPC in favor of a 3rd large laser and add more heat sinks to make it more heat efficient though. And I might drop the small laser for more armor as well. But this was, pretty much the total mech of MechWarrior 4 Black Knight expansion pack. That wraps up the heavy mechs. Next up are the assault mechs. Now, first assault is the Awesome. This was the first assault mech I ever piloted, and it lives up to the name. It is awesome. 3 PPCs and a small laser. 80 tons. So this thing's actually fairly durable for its being a relatively small assault. It's slower than average, but far from the slowest assault. These 3 PPCs are absolutely devastating at range. But if something gets in close to it, it's almost completely helpless. Has to rely on the 1 small laser and punching. As I recall, it's actually possible to get 4 large lasers onto this, which gives it more range flexibility and greater heat efficiency. And I used to love the PPC. Now, it was one of my early favorite weapons until I discovered the true awesomeness of the large laser. The Victor. The Victor is my favorite assault mech. It has average speed, it has jump jets, it has pretty much the same weapons loadout as a Orion, because the Orion can be reconfigured to this exact loadout. But since it's a assault, it has more structure, more armor, and jump jets. So this is, just an Orion done better. It is truly my favorite assault mech. The Zeus. This was the first mech I ever used the first assault mech I used in Mech Commander, and it stuck around for quite a while. It's an average speed mech. It has no jump jets, but it has reliable armor and a reliable loadout. Um, I would probably, go for either medium range, short range, or long range with it. Right now, it's a mixed ranged attacker, which, if you have a pilot with good gunnery skills that can, multi-target, you can lob an LRM 15-sided distant target and then use the other weapons at something closer. So it's not a bad configuration. And Mech Warrior, however, you would not want to use this. But in Batteltech, where you can split your fire, and it would be an effective weapon, an effective mech. Battlemaster. This is one of the most iconic mechs. It was not around for quite a while, but it's back in the game now. And it is another high energy, high heat mech. A PPC, 6 medium lasers, 2 machine guns, and an SRM-6. Thing can wreck at medium ranges. Because you want to be more than 180 meters away for the PPC. But the medium lasers are completely effective at that range, so is the SRM-6. Machine guns are useless at that range, but they're only used kind of as a support weapon anyway. So I might be tempted to replace the PPC or even go dual PPC. Because if you go dual PPC, maybe get rid of the machine guns for more heat sinks. This thing could be a wicked sniper that can actually stay in return fire. Stalker, this is a okay mech with 2 LRM-10s, 2 large lasers, 4 medium lasers, and 2 SRM-6. This is both a missile and a laser. So what it can do is it can kind of swap back and forth. If you start getting a little too hot, you just kind of back off a little bit, stop using the lasers and fire missiles. If you start, running low on ammunition, you move in close and start using the lasers. This thing is notorious for having heat problems because of all the laser weaponry and the missiles together. There's really nothing wrong with this mech. It's a little bit slow, but it's tough, and it has an effective all ranges weaponry. At close range, you lose the LRMs, but at medium ranges, everything can be used. At long range, you lose the 2 SRM-6, but the LRM-10s are amazing. This can be, if you want, you could probably put 2 LRM-20s on there and a decent amount of backup lasers and just rain death. Even more so than catapult, but the catapult, of course, is faster and has jump jets. But this can actually take some return fire, so I'm going to think if this thing and a catapult were raining on each other, this would definitely come out ahead. Alright, Highlander. This is the largest mech with jump jets. And once again, it's a mixed ranged mech. Gauss rifles are not available in the game. They just went into prototype in 3024 and the game's set in 3025. So, the only Gauss rifles to be found would be deep inside the inner sphere. They're not going to be out in the periphery. There's nothing wrong with this mech. However, I think it doesn't really do anything well, but you can reconfigure the weapons to do with it what you want. It can be an up-close and personal brawler, which I think it really should be, or you can use it as a stand back and do long-range support, because it can use the jump jets that get up onto a high vantage point and just snipe. In that case, the LRM-20 will do you good. I'd probably get rid of the SRM-6 And I'm not sure what it has instead of a Gauss rifle. Probably an AC-10. Banshee. I don't know much about the Banshee, really. I've never used it or even seen it in another game. So, but looking at it here, it looks like it's a long-range support mech that kind of lacks, it's really lacking in firepower. 1 PPC and an autocannon 5. Be annoying. It has average speed, no jump jets. I think I would probably go dual PPC on this. And probably see if I can shoehorn a couple medium lasers if something gets close. But, you know, it's faster than most heavy mechs. And at 95 tons, it's got to have a lot of armor with average speed and light weaponry. It's got to have a lot of armor. Crab. This thing is a DPS monster. 2 autocannon 20s. If both of these things hit, I mean, this will take the torso off of an Atlas if they both hit the same spot. LRM 15. This provides long range options. Large lasers, good for both close range and long range, so it can support either the LRM 15 or the AC-20s. It's a slow mech, but man, 2 autocannon 20s. That is devastating amounts of firepower. If I saw one of these things, I would not want to get close. I would want to trade and rain with it at long ranges. Because I think I would rather take my odds with, an LRM 15 and a large laser than 2 autocannons. Last is the Atlas. The Atlas is kind of the definitive mech. It's the one you see on the backside of most Batteltech MechWarrior games. It's kind of, I would say, the flagship of the whole series. The Atlas to Batteltech is what Pikachu is to Pokemon. It's not the greatest armed. I mean, its armament is impressive. 1 autocannon 20, an LRM 20, SRM 6, and 4 medium lasers. So it has, the mixed ability, not quite as much as the King Crab does, but it is tough. The Atlas is known for being able to take the most beating of any mech in the game. Alright, now coming out post-release is the Raven. Now, when you say light mechs, this is generally the mech I think of. But right now, it is in prototype stages. It was originally developed back in Starleague era, but the design was lost, and it was only here in 3024 that a new prototype was able to be made. I imagine the version that will show up in game would probably be the 2X, since there is no ECM in the game, so having a large laser would work. Alright, no NARC, no tag, no ECM. But when you say light mech, this is what I think of. Now it's fast, not the fastest, but it is fast. And when it actually does have ECM, it is a very good scout mech because it can see without being seen. It's the only real scout mech that can do that because the ECM system. Now there are a series of other vehicles. Most of these things are annoying, but the Demolisher here, The Demolisher mounts 2 AC-20s. It is a serious threat to any mech. Galleon, Manticore, Mobile Headquarters, Scorpion. The Shrek PPC carrier. This thing has 3 PPCs. It is dangerous at range. You want to try getting close to it. SRM carrier. This has 10 SRM-6s in it. It is also dangerous, but it's very vulnerable. You want to take this thing out at range. It's not shown in here, but there's also an LRM carrier, which has an LRM-60, 3 LRM-20s. It is dangerous at long range. You want to rush that thing. Then of course your dropships, your Leopard, and your Argo. I'm not going to talk much about these. These are going to be Leopards, you know, your standard single lance dropship. It's been used in most video games and the tabletop quite extensively. The Argo, however, is a new antique creation for this game. And then some of the other characters, but this is quite a long rambling video right now. But I'm very excited about this game, especially since it's only a $40 game. And I am very much looking forward to it, and I hope this video is helpful for everybody that gets to listen and watch it. And thank you very much.